It has been implied on this paper, What is Philosophy by Dietrich von Hildebrand, in regards to the very essence of philosophy, or to be more specific, pure philosophy. We can notice on the first page on this doctrine, to which philosophers are clearly reliant on unphilosophical methodologies in the search for understanding and possible answers to complex inquiries on the basis of empirical observations and analysis. This asserts that pure philosophy is to be defined as the subject that is free from the scientific speculation and should lean on more on itself and the man in the question alone, in complement with reason, logic, and conceptual analysis anchored on a priori knowledge. There is no such thing as pure philosophy, but at least existing as an idea, but philosophy itself.
Philosophy in general terms is the study of fundamental questions about existence, knowledge, values, reason, mind, and language. But why does this end up to our point about why there is no such thing as pure philosophy? Back in the ancient time, philosophy at its finest were mainly focused on the nature of the universe, simply their surroundings. With the use of a philosophical approach called cosmocentric, the questioning of reality as the science at that time are merely from what they observe in the nature they live in, to which then we can lean on the term a posteriori knowledge, in a basis sense that a posteriori knowledge is on the basis of experience and observation. These actions can be seen in getting scientific facts. We can see from this particular point of view that philosophy is interconnected with what we call empirical. Now, what will then support our thesis statement, given also the contextualization of what is philosophy and pure philosophy?
Reason number one is that pure philosophy ought not to use what the positivist philosopher used. These tools are mainly reason, logic, and conceptual analysis alone. But all of these three things enforces empirical mechanization, or on the basis of a posteriori knowledge. But it doesn't mean that if philosophy cannot be diminished, the use of empirical basis means it is necessitated to use science as their form of reasoning, justification, and argumentation, but rather letting it be the idea that science is a tool to forming examples in support of the insights obtained, that of which insights are one of the main methodologies in an approach dealing philosophical inquiry. In the deductive reasoning that, if philosophy uses insight, insight uses empirical examples, in which in itself is science, then philosophy uses science as an example. We can clearly see that if we rely on the concept pure philosophy as implied on this piece of work, then saying that there is pure philosophy is a thing not to think about in the first place.
Number two is that without a posteriori, that of which uses experience and observation as its basis, it would be impossible to really get the essence of philosophy in the first place, to which it sparked the idea of pure philosophy. Moreover, considering that a posteriori can become into a priori knowledge, and as stated on this piece work, arguing that philosophy is all about a priori knowledge, or at least more leaning onto it, then philosophy itself already uses a posteriori knowledge, which are not meant to be used as a basis in the first place.
Reason number three is that it doesn't mean that we deny the notion that there is a being of philosophy as pure, but rather reclarifying that it is inseparable in any way. The two previous reasons clearly displayed the idea of how empirical basis is anchored on explaining or grasping the complexities of existing philosophical ideas addressing a specific inquiry. However, with regard to the first reason, others might argue that we can use mathematical examples to explain the complex concepts that are born from philosophy, such as 2 plus 2 is equals to 4. This specific example, that is pure logic itself, does not touch real-world data.
Moreover, with respect to the second reason, others can argue that not all philosophical insights can be based on experiences. For example, I can think of what a golden mountain would look like even though it doesn't exist on a real world basis or is not shown in any of human experiences.
And lastly, negating the third reason would create an argument stating that we can separate things in theory even if they're mixed in practice in the first place. For example, pure geometry exists as an ideal, even if architects always apply it with real-world measurements. Likewise, pure philosophy can exist as a mental framework, focusing only on reason, even if in everyday life people mix it with empirical examples.
Although all these negations do have their point, following rebuttals would still occur. To the first objection, I answered that by contributing to a complex question all reduced to basic aspect, using a simple things to explain, and builds up over time. Though 2 plus 2 equals 4 is pure logic and acceptable by pure philosophy, as the basic logic that does not touch any real-world related experience basis. I would say things in that way would make the philosophy impossible to understand. I often face that real-world mechanization as an explanation to philosophical concept really helpful and will make me fully grasp the concept.
To the second objection, I would say that even if you can think of what a golden mountain looks like, despite it not being existing in the real world, we got the experience of what gold looks like, to which asserts the quality of something being gold, and what a mountain looks like. And both of these things exist in real world. Moreover, considering that I argue that a posteriori or a priori, we created the concept of golden mountain, mainly because we gained a prior knowledge about gold and mountain, to which then we relate them together and combine it as a whole.
In response to the third objection, while theory can be separated from real-world practice, studying philosophy requires grasping its essence, changing how we see and think. This necessitates combining observation of the real world with the ideas formed from those observations. So theories must still be understood in relation to how they operate in reality.
Based on what has been said so far, we have gained three main insights based on each three rebuttals respectively. Purely abstract reasoning like 2 plus 2 is equals to 4 might be correct, but it can be too detached for most people to truly understanding philosophy. Real-world examples make complex ideas easier to grasp and more relatable. Even imaginary things like Golden Mountain are built from real-world experiences. Our a priori concepts often come from combining pieces of a posteriori or experience-based knowledge. Theory and practice can be separated in thought, but to understand philosophy's full essence, you must connect ideas with real-world observations. Philosophy changes our thinking by linking abstract concept with practical reality.
In conclusion, pure philosophy does not exist solely on the fact that all forms of methodologies were connected or cannot be independent of empirical examples, but also because of its definition as stated earlier.
Starting today, we can learn philosophy not fully relying on non-philosophical methodologies, but using such as examples, seeing and grasping how philosophical view would look like in a real-world basis, gaining an in-depth insight. I will also be very wary of unphilosophical approaches to philosophical inquiry and not fully enforcing it as a main tool to gain insights. And finally, I will also be fully open on the future definitions of pure philosophy that may possibly challenge all these answers.